Welcome to Alpha Insights. I'm Riley. Today we're unpacking a busy day in the cannabis space. Policy wins in some states, tougher enforcement in others, and a federal push that could change the hemp market. Joining me is Josh, our resident market historian and narrative guy. Josh, good to have you.
Thanks, Riley. Great to be here. And hey, listeners, remember, if you have questions as we go, you can ask us at stockalpha.ai.
Josh, big picture first. How would you summarize what investors should have felt sitting in their portfolios today?
So the short version is mixed signals. On one hand, you've got some clear policy progress at the state level that points to expansion over the next several quarters. On the other hand, regulators are tightening rules and even issuing recalls, and at the federal level, there's pressure that could shrink parts of the hemp market. That combination gives both upside catalysts and fresh risk to manage.
Let's dig into the state stuff. Virginia moved forward on resentencing and commercial sales. What does that actually mean for operators and investors?
Right. When state lawmakers advance companion bills like Virginia did, they're not selling product tomorrow, but they're creating a roadmap. Practically, it means regulators will eventually have a framework to issue commercial licenses. For vertically integrated companies that can move east, that's a structural growth signal. More retail doors, more wholesale demand. The curveball is timing. Revenue depends on how quickly licenses are issued and how ready the supply chain is. So investors should watch implementation dates, not just bill passage.
There were also tougher rules in Missouri and a recall in New York. Walk me through the implications there.
Yeah. That was a reminder that regulation matters as much as legalization. Missouri regulators filed rules aimed at weeding out bad actors, things like disqualifying owners with problematic histories. That raises compliance costs, but it also protects legitimate operators by raising barriers to entry. And New York's recall, triggered by unreliable lab results, shows how fragile retail supply and consumer trust can be. When a lab goes sideways, products get pulled from shelves, operators scramble, and regulators look for systemic fixes. Expect more audits and testing scrutiny broadly.
Right. Now, the federal angle. Law enforcement groups are pushing for a hemp-derived THC ban. How big a deal is that?
This one is a big wild card. These groups want Congress to let a law that would recriminalize most hemp-derived THC products take effect. If Congress does nothing and the law takes effect, companies built around hemp THC could face immediate market contraction and legal exposure. That means distribution channels close, inventories become hard to sell, and share prices that priced in that revenue can reprice quickly. For investors, it's a scenario-driven risk. Either Congress delays or alters the timeline, or companies need contingency plans and possible legal defenses.
We also heard about corporate expansion and new cultivation techniques. Jetty extracts got some attention. Is this the part of the market you're bullish on?
Honestly, I was a bit surprised by how disciplined some of these expansion stories are. Companies like Jetty are highlighting build-outs and long-term strategies rather than short-term rollouts. And when cultivators innovate to reliably increase annual yields, that's a margin story. More product per acre, lower unit costs. But durable winners will be the ones with clean balance sheets, deep licensing footprints, and operational discipline. Growth alone isn't enough if a company gets caught in a recall or a sudden regulatory ban.
So, practical question. What should investors do right now? Sell, buy, or sit tight?
So the real question here is what exposure you actually have. If you're holding companies that rely heavily on hemp-derived THC, review that exposure and consider hedges or rebalancing. If you own operators poised to enter newly legalized states with strong balance sheets, this could be a buying opportunity, but monitor implementation timelines closely. More generally, track state legislative calendars, watch congressional movement on hemp THC, and pay attention to lab audits and recall reports. Be selective, lean toward companies with diversified revenue streams and conservative capital structures. And one practical tip for investors who also run businesses in the space. If a lab recall affects your products, pull the affected SKUs immediately. Communicate openly with customers, and prepare for audits. Regulators expect speed and transparency.
Quick note on tracking names. What should people use as proxies to watch how these stories affect the sector?
Use a U.S. Cannabis Sector ETF to watch flows And keep an eye on individual operators that are active in state expansions. Names like Trulieve, Green Thumb, Curaleaf, and Tilray are often used as bellwethers. Watch how they react to policy headlines and recalls. You'll see sector sentiment translate into stock moves.
To wrap up, give our listeners 2 or 3 quick takeaways they can act on.
Sure. 1. State policy wins matter, but timing and implementation determine revenue. Watch licensing guidance closely. 2. Regulatory enforcement and lab integrity are immediate risks. Expect more audits and potential recalls, and factor compliance costs into any investment thesis. 3. The federal hemp THC story is a major wildcard. Review exposure to hemp-derived THC and have contingency plans.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Josh. That's a helpful way to frame it.
My pleasure.
If you have questions about anything we discussed today, you can ask us directly at stockalpha.ai. We answer listener questions live. And for more market insights, head over to stockalpha.ai. Thanks for listening to Alpha Insights.